I guess I sort of give you like a little bit of a political framework at the European level and what's going on to try and realize Timothy's dream, right? So this is exactly what we are striving for. So to see the bio-based economy, the sustainable bio-based economy is really like the new economy, nothing less, right? So as our solutions to the global challenges of climate change and the sustainable development goals. So, well, of course, Timothy had a very interesting biography all linked to this talk. In my case, of course, it's a much shorter time that I've been working on this. So essentially, this is when I joined the European Commission a couple of years ago. I worked on marine resources for a while, marine energy. And then my director in the Bioeconomy Directorate asked me to help the drafting of this update of the bioeconomy strategy. So maybe I can give you a couple of insights also of what happens at the political level across the different director generals, of course, of the Commission and so forth. So okay, the whole question here is that essentially roughly a month ago, with the adoption of the 2018 EU bioeconomy strategy, and this is an update of a strategy that you know very well, which is the first bioeconomy strategy that came in 2012. Now, this slide is just sort of to show the fact that maybe differently from before, this is now endorsed at the highest political level, right? So in the State of the Union of 2018, you have President Juncker singling out the bioeconomy as really like one of the engines through which the European Commission would facilitate its priorities, notably on jobs and growth. Right? So this is quite interesting because we see this move from 2012 to 2018 as a sort of like escalation of the European commitments to the bioeconomy from niche to norm, right? So from scientific research into something else. So this was extremely important for us. So at the political level, this is Carlos Moedas, who is our Commissioner for Research and Innovation, which really has this sort of like holistic approach to bioeconomy, right? So in a sense, with the updated policy context, you know, notably the circular economy, sustainable development goals, and so forth, he wanted to have a very strong action where we would try to like use all the good research and innovation that has been developed so far and scale it up to the market, right? So this was the mission that he set for us 6 months ago when we started reviewing this bioeconomy strategy. Basically, the two biggest players here are Commissioner Katainen, that you see on the left, who is the Vice President for Jobs and Growth, so really like the person behind the Renew Industrial strategy for the EU economy and behind the plastic strategy that you know, and as I was saying, Commissioner Moedas. So essentially, this is, I think, an important feature to underline. So the fact that this time around, the political willingness, the political desire was very much driven by the industry side. So in fact, roughly a year ago, there was another communication on the renewed industry for Europe, led by Katainen, where essentially they single out bioeconomy as instrumental in achieving both circularity and the renewed industrial base for Europe, right? So this idea that indeed the renewable component of the economy should grow more and more and substitute fossil fuels as much as possible. Now, this is just an idea of what our understanding of the bioeconomy is. So it's much broader in a sense to what Timothy referred to. Like in our case, we also encompass primary production, fisheries, aquaculture, agriculture, and so forth, which for our side creates different challenges, right? So we have a very dynamic bio-based sector, biotech sector, which shows the greatest potential for investment and jobs growth and so forth. But then, of course, we have large parts of the European Union which are not actively participating in this development. Right? So as policymakers, our big challenge here is how to like interrelate all the policies that we have available to deliver not only in, so to speak, at the top level, right? So to make these reforms felt throughout Europe. So this is, I think, also what I feel the closest to when it comes to the bioeconomy, right? The potential to really like have an impact at all levels. And then of course, in our discussions with the colleagues from the Director General for Environment, we came to the conclusion that in fact there is not the possibility to achieve a circular economy without strongly developing the bioeconomy, because of course the challenges that are going to be ahead for the circular economy out there are essentially what are we going to do with organic waste, right? So with the part of waste that is harder to recycle, and so forth, right? So we are coming in with a new, very strong legislation on waste regulations, which is going to force a 70% reduction in landfilling, which of course is extremely difficult to achieve, especially for new member states and so forth, which have been lagging behind a little bit in this sector. So the question is, how do we come together with the requirement, right? So you have to cut your landfilling with a solution, right? So organic waste is not going to be a burden on you, but is actually a possibility, right? Through the research and innovations possibilities of the bioeconomy. So this is just like the Joint Research Center assessment of the size of the bioeconomy in Europe. So in a sense, we came to the conclusion that no one knows how big it is, right? Because there are also like very different ideas of what it is and so forth. But what is certain here is that when we show, for instance, the employment figures, which capture mostly also farmers, fishermen, and so forth, the challenge there is that these numbers are decreasing, right? Because of course, communities in coastal areas and rural areas and so forth are moving to cities and so forth. So how do we make the bioeconomy deliver for jobs also in these areas is a key question that we have. Now, just to give you a little bit of context here, so essentially there was already a first bioeconomy communication in 2012, and it was mostly focused on the issue of food security. So it was a joint communication between the Director General of Agriculture and Rural Development and the Directorate General for Research and Innovation. And it was essentially, you could frame it this way, right? It was a sort of like political negotiations going on about the reuse of resources that were progressively drained from the common agricultural policies into new, more innovative fields, and the reuse of those to make agriculture and rural development more innovative itself. Then in 2017, we were required to produce a review on the bioeconomy strategy. We showed that there were a lot of, as just discussed, lots of big development when it came to the context of this bioeconomy, right? And therefore, we had this sort of like idea of launching the new updated economy. Now, all these acronyms that won't necessarily tell you much are in a sense important, right? Because the fact that agriculture and rural development, environment, marine resources, industry, joint research center, energy, and so forth were all involved in the drafting of this new text is relevant because, in a sense, it really shows that there is a commitment to it that is a little bit more cross-sectorial than it was before. And this is important because also, as we were just discussing, we just heard, the importance of having like coherent policies, policy frameworks in order to like attract private investments and so forth. It's really something that we should think more about. And it's important that at least all the major players are around the same table and co-drafted this document. And then on the basis of this, we can hope for more coherent strategies overall. So as I was saying, this was adopted in October, and it's an important step because, of course, you have also to understand that this is really one of the last actions, is the last communications, for instance, that the commissioners will take before elections, right? So this is a strong closure message for the commissioner. So the 2017 strategy showed that there was development thanks to the 2012 strategy, but that more had to be done. So, for instance, research and innovations under Framework Program 7 doubled into Horizon 2020, right? So there was essentially a move from 2 billions to more than double, in fact, almost to 3.8 billions. But in fact, this is looking forward, so looking to the next framework program, Horizon Europe, there is now a commitment for 10 billion research into bioeconomy and food research, right? So there is this dimension of the fact that at least at the research and innovation level, this is growing. Now, when we talked to industry, to stakeholders in the field and so forth, the big question was, of course, how do we measure progress in this field? And this is something that the first bioeconomy strategy didn't deliver, right? So the fact that how much is the share of our bio-based economy compared to the fossil-based economy and so forth, this, we didn't have the capacity to find out, and so this is something that we want to deliver for the future. Another extremely important feature of the new bioeconomy strategy is that the DG for Environmental Affairs is a co-drafter of this document. He's actually one of the producers of this document, together with research and innovation, agriculture, marine resources, and so forth. Now, this is important because in 2012, there was always a question of what can we call bio-based, if something that is bio-based is always better than fossil-based, and so forth. You're all aware about the fossil fuel debates and so forth. So, you know, in a sense, the fact that we can have our colleagues from DG Environment together on the same document from the beginning of the setting up of the strategy, for us is very important, because the type of questions that we could ask each other were very frank. So, for instance, with some colleagues from the Directorate in DG Environment that works on plastics and recyclable plastics, we sort of had very long conversations whether we could include the notion of biodegradable plastics in the bioeconomy strategy as a potential solution for a plastic-free ocean, right? So at the beginning, there was not such a possibility, right? So there was constantly this sort of debate on whether such a thing as biodegradability could be really achieved with plastics. But throughout the conversations at the political level, we decided that this is something that we are willing to invest together. And the other points, for instance, the local context and valorizing local resources and adaptation to local needs is probably one of the stronger points that animated this conversation. Because as I was saying, in funding for research and innovations, in funding from the private sector and so forth, the 2012 strategy delivered. What, in a sense, was still missing is the fact that the consumers, the European citizens and voters, don't seem to be aware of what this bio-based economy or what this bioeconomy is, right? So there is a need, in a sense, to create that market, because as the previous speaker said, this is not about producing gimmicks and things like that. It is really about transforming the entire economy into something new. So along these lines, basically the President Juncker endorsed this strategy because it really pushes most of the main policy priorities for the EU, right? So we discuss about job creation. So there are bio-based estimates in the industries that this could create 1 million jobs by 2030, but really the most important thing for us is the fact that potentially some of these jobs will stay in coastal and rural areas, right? So there is this idea that if you're a primary producer of feedstock, you could be integrated into the bio-based development and enjoy essentially the products of taxpayer money in this type of research. The importance of climate mitigation, so the next commission, in a sense, if we are to deliver on our climate change mitigation ambitions, the next commission has to be understood as a climate change effort, right? So they say that every single euro spent by the next commission should be spent in order to address this goal, and the bioeconomy goes in this direction. And then, as we said, the renew to make our industries more competitive for the future, right? So this idea here is also a way of selling to a certain extent the Sustainable Development Goals and the whole overall debate on development at the political level to our stakeholders and the local populations. So this is the idea that sustainability is really not only like an environmental constraint for industries and so forth, but is a way where the knowledge-based economy of Europe can innovate faster than its competitors. And the importance of the circular economy, so in a sense, the big package on the circular economy requires a healthy bioeconomy in order to be achieved, right? Because when it comes to reuse of food waste stream or industrial streams from biological products and so forth, we need some type of ready-end toolkit to be offered. And also the linkages with biodiversity and healthy ecosystems, right? So this is where our colleagues from DG Environment came in at the very beginning. So the question here is, we speak of a sustainable bioeconomy only if we are sure that the feedstock that goes into the bio-based sector and into the bio-based products is actually generated in the way, produced in a way that doesn't alter biodiversity and actually actively contributes to this. Now, these are all long-term visions, right, that are enshrined in this document. It's something that we need to deliver on. So because of this, we have a set of actions that we are committing to complete in the next we're committing to launch in the next 3 years, and then of course the conversation essentially will lead these to the 2030 goals. So there is, roughly the action plan is divided along 3 broad lines. So the first broad line is the need to boost the bio-based sector. So in a sense, already a lot has been done for the bio-based sector by the first bioeconomy strategy. For instance, the bio-based industries joint undertaking between the European Union and the private sector generated 3.8 billion of investments. So this is, of course, was an important goal. And as I said, in the next framework program, there is a commitment for roughly 10 billion euros. So this commitment will, the commitment towards research will continue and is considered to be as important as before, so it's not stopping. And also we are launching, has already been launched, in fact, a circular bioeconomy thematic investment platform that looks specifically at the bio-based solutions for the challenges of the cities, right? So if you're thinking about, you're a city planner and you have to do something about, your water waste stream, and you have to adhere to the new waste legislation. What do you do? Okay, here there is some extra funding that can help you to navigate in this direction. But of course, this is just a small percentage of what is needed, right? So what the longer aim here, the longer aim for the European Union, together with the stakeholders here, is to create an investing environment where it's clear what, for instance, what a bio-based product is, whether this particular bio-based product has a positive impact on the environment, and so forth, right? So to create a set of guidance, a set of labels that will allow consumers and therefore a producer to invest confidently in a product. So this is part of what we are doing in the collaboration with the bio-based sector. And as I was saying, the fact that there is as you all probably know and are, there is this keen interest in having at least part of the transformation of feedstock into new products happen at the local level, right? So for instance, we are investing in a Blue Bioeconomy Forum, which aims to, for instance, have the first transformations of fishery discards into products and so forth already on board of ships or just on board in just offshore on biorefineries, right? So this idea of shortening the value chains of bio-based products to have to share more equally the proceeds with the producers. The second field of actions is essentially linked to the need to localize, to deploy locally the bioeconomy across Europe. So I mentioned most of these already, but so essentially after the first bioeconomy strategy in 2012, now there is roughly, I think, half a dozen, a bit more than half a dozen bioeconomy strategies already developed at the national level, and a number of regional bioeconomy strategies, right? So linking into the ways in which we should integrate all the parts of the value chains of the bioeconomy at the local level and at the national level. And essentially now we are offering support and facilities for everyone to join this. So the idea is to grow the number of bioeconomy strategies that have been drafted by member states and by the regions, and to allow, in a sense, to share the information about bio-based innovation at the local level as well. And this goes hand in hand with the promotion of new training skills, master programs, and so forth across the bioeconomy. So to have, I guess, this interdisciplinary dimension that is required by successful bio-based, not only by successful bio-based industries, but also, for instance, for local producers to actively participating in this type of economic possibilities. We are offering training schemes, for instance, for farmers, fishermen, and so forth at the local level. So this is also something that is part of this overall strategy and is coordinated by the Director General on Education and Culture. So this is the other aspect. Thirdly, the question here is how do we build from the beginning the notion of biodiversity and ecosystem, respect of biodiversity and ecosystems within the bioeconomy. Now, at the moment, we don't have much, right? So at the moment, in a sense, if you ask a colleague from environment about what he says or she sees as a proof or what type of standards a bio-based product should adhere to demonstrate that we have that we're respecting fully ecological boundaries and so forth, well, the response is that we don't know, right? And essentially not knowing, we prefer not to act. And this has been really like probably the major hurdle for the bio-based sector to expand at the European level. Because, for instance, already only 15–20% of consumers say that they're actually interested in bio-based sectors and so forth for its ecological rewards and so forth. But of them, a lot of them have skepticism about whether this is really good for the environment or not, right? So the importance of working together to address the question of ecological limits of the bioeconomy. And this is, for instance, it's something that is being done at the overall level of the European Union, also when it comes to trade. So, for instance, the Directorate General for Development and Cooperation of the EU is investing quite heavily in having a traceability for the feedstock for bio-based products coming from third countries, right? So this idea that we can really say that a particular feedstock, a particular input for our bio-based industries really can be said not to have favored a degradation of ecosystems abroad and so forth, right? So this is animated by this understanding that, of course, the European bioeconomy, in fact, uses 70% more than its land base, right? So the reason why the European bioeconomy can grow the way it's growing and so forth is because, of course, it's integrated in a global market for feedstock and so forth. And the other aspects that we have here, so for instance, the promotion of biodiversity in primary production, is really the relaunching of something that was happening already before. So for instance, in 2008, so already 10 years ago, there were some biodiversity goals for primary productions in the agricultural sector enshrined by the last Common Agricultural Policy. And the fact is that we lacked still some of the monitoring tools to get to this, to the understanding that biodiversity is protected in this type of cultivations. And so in the bioeconomy strategy, we're also trying, in a sense, to relaunch some of the activities that have already been ongoing. And the issue here is that essentially politically, maybe something was launched even 10 years ago and so forth, but at the time, for whatever reason, there was not the overall coherence of at the political level to deliver on this. So the idea was to like take some of the issues that were raised before and they didn't deliver in practice and use this, the bioeconomy to sort of like relaunch this possibility. Now, of course, France is an extremely important member state when it comes to the research and innovation in the bio-based sector. So these are just pulled a few generic figures from the Horizon 2020 bioeconomy projects. So the importance to the country is it's the first, in fact, member state for a number of projects. So the question is, of course, an encouragement, essentially, this slide is an encouragement to keep working together because, of course, if the next framework program sees a doubling of the funding coming to bio-based innovations, then of course the role of the French institutions is going to be crucial. Then I have these innovations are across different sectors. So these are just a few examples of the type of projects that have been developed. So some of them are joint undertaking projects. So for instance, here on the left, you have a project that would have a contribution from the European Commission and contributions from the private sector, and where you see the development of cosmetics starting from biomaterials. And this is very much linked to the priorities on job creations of the bioeconomy. And then we also have all the various linkages to the circular economy, as I was saying. So for instance, how can the bioeconomy deliver on this green component of the circular economy, and how can we protect our seas and oceans from the problem of plastics, for instance, through the development of bio-based products and so forth. Yeah, Fabrice, I think 3 minutes left. No, I think I can conclude here with this, and I accept questions. Huh?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good. Thanks for the timing. It's pretty interesting. You were on examples, so it's interesting for us to step into examples. Est-ce que vous avez des questions? Do you have any questions for Agostino Inguscio? Oui, on va vous passer le micro. Merci.
Agostino, is there a specific initiative dedicated to bio-based sustainable surfactants? Replacement of detergent, as you know, this economy is releasing 15 million tons of chemical detergent due to cosmetic industry, agri-food, etc., in the waste and the water, ultimately. So is there, in the frame of this program, a specific one that is dedicated to replacing those chemical detergents by bio-based sustainable surfactants?
So we're on examples, as we said.
Yeah, so there is not, unfortunately, a specific policy developed on this at the moment, but what there is a component of this policy in the waste legislation. So they require for a reduction of these, the detergents, and we have a project, in fact, which aims to essentially use microfilters for plastics to also capture these toxins. So there is something happening at the research and innovation level, funded also a bit by member states and by the EU, but there is not something specific on the product in question. And I think part of this is also the question about clear labeling of the impacts. So clear labeling of what product has what impacts, which is something that instead this communication tries to achieve.
Thank you. Y a-t-il d'autres questions? Une autre question? Oui. Okay. For Tim, please.
I'm curious if the structure of the framework program 2020, the structure of it was very insistent on spreading grants across 5-10 different labs across the EU, which was really almost counterproductive to collaboration because it fragmented things so deeply that nobody really could get a meaningful handle on the research. I wonder if you're taking a different approach in the next iteration.
Easy question.
No, it's. I'll take it on a personal level because, of course, it's hard to speak commission-wise about this. So, first of all, for the next framework program, Horizon Europe, we are now in the proposal phase. So there is a proposal being made by the European Commission, but the legal text is actually being negotiated now by member states. So the Council and Parliament. So in a sense, the response to your question is the outcome of the negotiation. So hard to predict. Now, for us, of course, it's very important to have this spread across different member states and so forth. And in fact, one of the probably the success stories here is that we potentially created the ecosystem, so to speak, for this innovation to happen at the all level. Now, the Commissioner for Research and Innovation is especially keen to turn to market from these discoveries. So in a sense, for instance, from that point of view, is designing a new European Innovation Council, which is sort of modeled on the European Research Council, which is possibly the most known of the research councils of the EU at the moment. And in that case, it will be the idea to leave the private sector and the different labs a bit more free in how they want to play it. So they will allow also for international collaborations in much strengthened way and so forth. So hope that they can respond to some of the needs of the sector.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Okay? Oh, another question? No, it's okay. Thank you very much, Agostino Inguscio. Thank you for your participation.